Now you know how to declare and use a pointer to function in your programs. But you may be wondering what's the point of this, because if we already have a possibility to call functions in a normal way, why bother using complicated syntax to be able to call them via pointers to function? This is an excellent question, and of course, you can still use this technique. However, you have to remember that, as you will discover, there are certain particular cases where pointers to function can be really helpful, but mostly they can render your code more readable and more stable. How about I show you some examples? This example will show you pointers to function are totally appropriate for a solution. That you need to understand before checking out the example is that I chose to show you in the pseudocode and not in C. Because if I showed the real code in C, you would have all the answers for today's exercises. And you know it's not the point. So today we're going to see a syntax that doesn't exist, that I've invented for this demonstration. Just enough for you to get how to use pointers to function. You will have to transcribe this example in C in order to use it normally, but that's something that you will do on your own. The example I'm offering to imagine we are in a situation where we have three functions which allow us to write an arbitrary data either on the standard output thanks to put_stdout, either in a file thanks to put_file, either on the network thanks to put_network. Let's imagine we have these functions, they're implemented and are perfectly functional. Here our goal will be to write a function put, which will take two parameters. The first parameter is what I've called where, which will allow us to know on which output to write, stdout, a file or network. And the second parameter, what, represents the data to write. The exact type of this data isn't important here, it's just to say that it exists. The naive approach, as the one you'd have had before today, would be to write something like if where is worth stdout, then I will code put stdout with what as a parameter, else if where is a file, see where I'm going with this. The problem here is that every time you want to add a possible destination, for example, write a function put str which write on the error output, I'm gonna have to position myself here and add an else if, etc. And we realize that we basically growing an entire forest of ifs, and it's acceptable to write ugly things like this in your code. A clean and efficient solution for this problematic is to use a set of pointers to function to be able to call the right function. Let's see what we have here. We have three functions, put_stdout, put_file, and put_network, which will have the same prototype. They don't return anything in particular, and all take an argument what as a parameter to write it where it should. So it will be possible for us to regroup a bunch of pointer to functions in an array and associate to each entry the moment where we want to use it, and so if we're asked to use stdout, a file or network, and in a pair, the function to use in this case. The pseudocode would look something like this. Let's imagine our array of pointer to functions, which would be made of list of pairs, for example, an array of pairs, or what you want to do in C, where we'd have as a first information where to write, in which case selecting this array's entry, and the second info, a pointer to function that need to be used in this case, which will allow us below in your function put to lighten the code and make it much more practical, keeping in mind we are still taking where and what as parameters. Then we'll simply do a loop. In my pseudocode I've used the keyword for, but you will use while or recursion, it's up to you. So for each entry in my array, I'm going to have a couple of the where of reference and the function put associated. And I will check whether the where that was asked to use correspond to the where in our array. If it's the case, then I will use the associated put something function, else if nothing else happened, the array keeps looping until we find the right function, or if we don't, we have to handle error case. But this is going further than the exercise goal. This is a canonic shape of the programming. You will realize that you'll sometimes come across this kind of situation, and in those moments it could be interesting to remember pointers to function to know how to use them appropriately. See you in a moment for the conclusion for today's lesson.